Hello and welcome to this edition of the Happs Takeover. We have an amazing lineup of experts and important voices here for this topic on Suicide Awareness Month. A voice at the table. This is led by Lucia Abar from the Happs team. Lucia, how are you doing? Get up here.
I'm here. Hi. Oh, okay. Hi, everyone. So yes, this is going to be a conversation around suicide awareness, but we're gonna have different guests, live painting, and we're gonna have Craig Miller, who's an author and speaker, and oh yeah, well here they are. Um, well, Craig is we have Craig, we have Joe and Lindsay and Bobby, who are going to be live drawing something that's around the same topic that we're going to be talking about. So, yes, I'm going to start with Craig. Um, you can do an intro, present yourself to the audience,
Sure.
whatever you want to say.
Yeah. So my name is Craig Miller. I'm an author and speaker, suicide prevention and mental health advocate. My story, without getting into it, super deep, had a fairly extensive history of mental health issues. I grew up with sexual abuse in a very dysfunctional household with violence and alcoholism. Was bullied quite a bit. But which again, there's nothing unique there. I want to be clear on that. I don't believe there's anything unique about my story whatsoever. But I use it to share a message of what I've learned in life and how I've been able to cope with mental health issues, depression, and the struggles that I've dealt with, including suicide and a suicide attempt. So when I talk about like talking about mental health and suicide prevention, I don't think I'm an expert in mental health, and I'm definitely not an expert in suicide prevention. And I'll be honest with you, I don't think we have experts in suicide prevention. To me, an expert is really someone who not only understands a particular topic or a subject so much that it's become an integral part of themselves and their consciousness. It's part of their life. It's part of how they live it, but they have the ability to control it. We don't have that in suicide prevention. We don't really know what works. We know a few things that work. We know a few things that help, and we know what works for some people and doesn't work for other people, but we don't have a solution. And that's the reason that this is continuing to grow. So when I speak about suicide prevention and mental health, I use my own story because that's where I'm an expert in. That's what I've learned to understand and manipulate and control and own and create into what I want to be and build a life for myself for how I want to live it. After I survived a significant suicide attempt in my early 20s, I made it a very serious mission to make myself as well as I could and try to move on with my life and live in a way that was healthy for me and my family. And I wrote a book about 10 years ago. I wrote my first memoir, which was not just a story. And again, that's important to me that we don't just share our stories. We more importantly share what we've learned and how we grow from that and how our message can help other people more than just sharing our message. I think anyone can really get up and talk about all the bad things that have happened to them and how hard they've struggled and how bad things hurt. But when we're allowed to have that kind of platform, I think it's really important that instead of sharing all the hurt, we try to share the hope and talk about what helped us and how we got as far as we have. And that's what I've tried to do. So after I wrote my book, I had no intention of getting involved in suicide prevention or mental health whatsoever. I really just wanted to help people. And the book got a lot of attention, and that's what happened. And I started speaking publicly about 10 years ago and have since gone on to be in 2 different documentaries, and I've done dozens of keynote addresses at state and national conferences and I've toured Lithuania and done some speaking in Kazakhstan and other countries around the world. And again, it's really just about sharing what I've learned and how I've grown more than what's happened to me and what I've been through.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. We were talking about that when we were kind of discussing what angle or approach we wanted to give. It can be tricky because it's not just you telling your story and details and all that. That's not the point. It's more of what can experts and other people learn from our experience, and maybe what goes through our minds, or whatever the situation we were in. But it's not, I mean, when we do this, it's not about just going live and talking about, okay, I did this and that, and go into a whole bunch of details. That's not the point. I don't think that doesn't enter in the awareness thing. It's just we sharing our experience and how together with maybe experts we can, it's like a teamwork. So yeah, I think that's important to address so people don't get confused with one thing or the other. So yeah. um and when I found Craig, I found it through the Suicide Prevention Resource Center. And there's a term that they use that was the same term that Craig told me, that is lived experience. So we're gonna play a short video of what that concept, so you guys can understand the approach and the angle that we're trying to do here. And after that, we're gonna continue with our conversation, if that's okay. Should I? Okay.
So, as a young woman who basically grew up in various mental health services, I always understood that the experts, or the only experts, I should say, are the ones who have a series of letters after their names. And I never thought that I had any kind of expertise or really anything to offer. And it really wasn't until I got involved in the recovery movement that I heard about this concept of lived experience. And as it was explained to me, that it's really this idea that we are experts by experience, people who've lived with mental health conditions, people who've been suicidal, people who are trauma survivors, that is just as valuable as the kind of academic credentials that people earn, and that it's incredibly important that we work together as partners. The Zero Suicide Initiative is really promoting the importance of including lived experience as a guiding force in helping to shape the way services are designed and delivered, to really ensure quality control, to make the services relevant and accessible to the populations that we're working with. So there's a whole variety of benefits that can accrue. Another benefit of involving people with lived experience in your planning and your policy development, et cetera, that it really increases credibility and trust with the community. I've worked with hospitals, for example, that do have community outreach programs where they invite all of the stakeholders and regularly consult with them and ask, what they could be doing better, how they could improve their community linkages and their continuum of care. And it really does foster trust and credibility, and people really do feel like they have a stake in the process. And it helps to really create a stronger community engagement overall. It's important to remember that involving people with lived experience and involving peer support, it's a process. It's not something that's going to happen overnight. And it takes time and it takes commitment, but it's absolutely doable. So I really encourage you to just take whatever step that you can take right now and just build on it. Make an effort to really incorporate that lived experience voice more deeply into what you're doing.
So yeah, that was the concept that we wanted to introduce. Um, so Craig, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about your. Did you work directly with them, like with the Suicide Prevention Resource
Yeah,
Center?
yeah. So there's, I would say, probably more recently than you'd think. Probably only within the last 5 years or so, the suicide prevention community has just started to really embrace the voice of lived experience, which would totally surprise you. And again, this kind of goes back to what my, like when I published my book. I put my book out there. First of all, I wrote my book. Writing had always been my coping thing, which is absolutely awesome that we have people drawing and doing art and creating right now today. This is just so appropriate because that to me is like probably one of my strongest coping skills is to create in some way. And I could get into like why that works and why I think it's so important for all of us in our mental health, like the meat behind the whole concept of creating anything. But for me, it was writing. That was how I did it. It just, if I hurt, I wrote. If I was sad, I wrote. If I was considering suicide, I wrote about it. It's how it helped me. So when I got to a point where I was like, okay, I'm gonna write a book now. I'm just gonna put it all out there, and I want to encourage anybody to do that. I was lucky. I had a back surgery, so I was home for 3 months from work, and I had an opportunity to just sit there with no responsibilities and focus on writing, and that's what I did. I wrote a book, and
Without
I wrote
feeling
it with the
guilty.
without feeling guilty, yep, or worrying about
Yeah.
like getting back to work quickly or whatever. So, anyways, I wrote it with the intention of giving it to my two young daughters. Of basically like this is what I've learned in life. This is what some of the issues I've gone through, and this is how I overcame them, and this is what I learned, and that was it. And I let a few friends read it, and they said, this could help people. So I really didn't know if I wanted people to know my story, and that's a big part of it, to come forward. I mean, uh, I'm a male from outside Boston with tattoos all up and down me, and I'm coming forward and saying, yeah, I was sexually molested for 8 years of my life, and I considered suicide since I was 8 years old, and I struggled with mental health issues my entire life, and I was hospitalized 5 times for mental health
Oh
issues
wow.
in my teen years. Like, do I want people I work with to know this? So I was really hesitant to come out with that book, and I decided to self-publish. I put it on Amazon, and I made a small list. I want you to pay attention. The reason I'm telling you this isn't for my sake. It's because I'm hoping to let you know that what the potential lies in everyone's story and what we can do by talking about issues like this.
Mhm.
So I self-published it on Amazon, and I put a private list together on Facebook where I was just let like 30 people know, hey, I wrote a book and it's on Amazon. You can get it here. Um, it stayed on the top 100 bestseller list in psychology of suicide prevention for 5 years.
Oh
And
wow.
I didn't promote it. I didn't do anything about it. I just put it out there. And a friend of mine sent me like probably about a month after I published it, a friend of mine sent me a link to a news article where someone was talking about, the article was about suicide. And in the comments, someone referenced me in the book and said, this book saved my grandson's life.
Oh
So
wow. I
I
got
was
chills.
like, yes, yeah, so me too, right? So I was like, wow, I have a responsibility in this. I didn't write the book from a suicide prevention perspective. I wrote it from a person who's, with lived experience who's a writer. So I was aware enough to know that there's what's called safe messaging. And that's being intentional about how we speak about suicide. That isn't sugarcoating it. It's not, dancing around heavy issues. It's just speaking about it in a way that has value and helps people rather than just causes turmoil and leaves people to figure it out on their own, which is the worst case scenario. So I reached out to a national organization in the United States, and I said, hey, I am a suicide survivor. I wrote a book and it's getting a lot of attention. I was wondering if you could read it and tell me if there's anything in it I need to change. I'm self-published, so I can just withdraw it and upload a new copy and go from there. And they wrote back to me and said, you are not a suicide survivor. You are a suicide attempt survivor. The term suicide survivor refers to people who've lost someone to suicide. Since you are an attempt survivor,
okay.
our organization doesn't have resources at this time to support that. And I was like, wow. First of all, I was like, wow, I guess I should have educated myself a little on terms before I reached out. But then at the same time, I was like upset. I'm like, thank God I'm well. Thank God I'm okay. Like imagine if I had just come out of a suicide attempt and reached out to a national organization and they told me, we don't help you people, so that was a huge motivator for me to really get started. And that's what I did. I got very serious, and I live in Massachusetts in the United States, and I reached out to the Massachusetts Coalition for Suicide Prevention, and I told them the same thing. I wrote a book and it's getting a lot of attention. I want to make sure I worded everything correctly. Can you look at it? And they read it and they invited me to speak at their state conference. So I went from publishing a book on my own to 6 months later speaking in front of 500 people. And it was just at the time when the suicide prevention community was just starting to recognize people with lived experience. You would think that, for decades, they would be like, hey, maybe we should talk to the people who've been there. Maybe we should talk to the people who've consider suicide and live with suicide and talk to them and find out what helps and what hurts and what works and what doesn't. And it just wasn't happening. And the overall sense, I don't want to get too hung up on the past, but the overall sense for years in suicide prevention was that they didn't want to put people who were attempt survivors together because they were afraid they would share ideas, that it would instigate more potential for suicide and sort of like grow this darkness, when in fact they were totally wrong and it was exact opposite. And so in the last 5 years or so, the suicide prevention community and the field itself has really been embracing and making huge strides towards incorporating lived experience into everything. And I said I've been invited to keynote state conferences, national conferences, and done tons and tons of talks. That's not because I'm anything special. It's because there's a huge need for the people in suicide prevention to hear from people who've been there. And I'm just one of those people. So that's how I got to work with them.
That also goes with the safe messaging. What you were saying before of, people thinking that if you put together a bunch of, suicide attempt survivors, it would only, fuel the idea or put ideas in someone else's head. So I think the safe messaging is really like key when we're talking about that. And also having people that, well, maybe experts or someone, I don't know, psychologists, people that work with that. So we're kind of a resource, a tool that people can use and learn from that, instead of just, going really graphic and saying it all that, because that's not the point.
Right.
That's not gonna make me feel better, and I don't think anyone, it's gonna. We're trying to just get something productive out of our experience, so others can know, because usually you hear about it through, people that, well, they committed suicide.
Right.
and not through people that, you know, attempted or, you know, that are still here and that can tell you, okay, I can tell you whatever is happening inside me and why I might, you know, why I try to do this, and we can work together and find a way of really preventing this from happening instead of just going on and on about the fact or whatever it is that we did. So I
Right.
think safe messaging is, it's really the only way that we can talk about it in a safe way and have a positive outcome, you could
Yeah.
say.
Yeah, exactly. And not only that, not only, you know, safe messaging, which is basically like in a nutshell, it's like in a nutshell with suicide prevention in itself as an attempt survivor, especially like I wouldn't speak to you about how I attempted and go into the details of what
Exactly.
happened to me in that moment and things like there's no value in that. There's no
Exactly.
value. And if we have a limited time, which we always do when we're speaking about it in a public forum, I want to use that time as wisely as I can, and I want to be able to give you as much information as I can, as much insight into suicidal mind and suicidal thinking. And this is what I think is so important when we all come together. We actually have I help facilitate an attempt survivor support group. And again, that's something that's totally new in suicide prevention. Only in the
Really?
last couple of years, oh yeah, only in the last couple of years has there been actual like scripts and processes to follow for holding suicide attempt survivor support groups. For a long time it was frowned on. Like you don't want to get those people together because they're just going to
No.
commiserate and share ideas and they'll end up worse. And that's not the case at all.
And
When we
there's
get together,
the
go ahead.
shame too. There's a
Yeah,
lot of
there's
shame
always
around the
shame around
topic.
that.
So
Yeah. And I try to help with that. Like I'm here to talk about, I made a decision to talk about things, and that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to put it all on the table. And if there's anything I can do or say to help someone, how could I hold back on that? You know, and it's true. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've had people reach out to me and just say, thank you for telling me what you've gone through. But more importantly, like how you got through it. And that's the key to the whole thing, really, you know. And where's the value in that story? So I would encourage anyone, if when you're thinking about talking about your story and everything, it's not so much everything you've been through, it's how you've gotten through it, what you do to cope. I mean, certainly you want to talk about what you've gone through and what you've experienced. It helps you, it could help the people around you, it helps normalize the conversation. But beyond that, how did you get through it and what's helping you the most? I mean, imagine that you sit at a lunchroom table at work or something, and you talk about how you can't sleep, you're having trouble sleeping, and everyone's like, "Oh, have you tried this tea? Have you tried
yeah,
melatonin?" Like I do that, you know.
what's with
What
the
if you sit there and said, what if you said, I've been so depressed lately and I don't understand why, you know?
yeah.
Like, let's talk about that. Let's talk about why you just can't get out of your own way and how things hurt, and see what conversation comes from that. What if someone says, hey, you know, that happens to me too, and let's talk more about that. Let's find out what helps me. And you know, it's worth speaking about.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's, I'm gonna put the image of your book so people know that, you know, um attempting suicide and finding life. I think that's a very powerful message. Um so okay, so but you started writing that book like with that purpose, or it was just kind of the fact that you use writing as a coping mechanism and then it just all came together?
Yeah, well, writing is definitely my coping mechanism, and that's how it came together. I didn't write with the intent of, you know, talking about my suicide attempt. What I wrote as a writer, you know, from a writer's perspective, I would say the biggest event of my life was my death, and that's
Yeah.
where I told my story from. So I chose to tell my story. I'm going to tell you right now, I'm starting to cry and I'm gonna keep crying because that's what happens. It's just who I am.
It's okay. Yeah.
It's not, and I want to understand. I want you to understand. I'm not sad. I'm not hurt. I'm not overwhelmed. I speak about this constantly for years in front of thousands of people, and I cry every time. It's just who I am. There's no sadness to it. There's no pain. It's just I'm very, very deeply connected to it. That's all it is. So,
Yeah.
and the other thing is, I'm not going to say sorry. Like, you want to know what one of my coping mechanisms is? I cry. I do it, and it helps. And I think it's a shame that
There's also shame on that.
yeah, no, but it's even more shameful that we stop ourselves from doing it. We're the only species on the planet that can laugh and cry. Why? We have a built-in system into our biology to calibrate our emotions. We get overwhelmed, we cry. Our body wants to cry. Our body wants to fix that. And instead of letting it happen, we stop it. And then we apologize for it. I'm sorry. We hold it down. We swallow our emotions and bury it. And man, that's like
And that's so not
ridiculous to
healthy
me.
also.
No, just let it happen. Who the hell cares?
Yeah.
So anyways, yeah, I cry when I talk about it. I always do. It's just a thing. And there's no pain to it. It's just a deep connection
no
to where it
shame
is
either.
in me.
It's just-
No shame at all. No, I have no shame. You can learn that. Yeah. So, anyways, yeah. That's where it stands for me right now. So I forgot what you even asked, but
It's okay. We all kind of lose our train of thought sometimes.
yeah.
No, I was asking about the book and how it, and if you wrote it to
Yeah, how it
publish
came about, right?
part of all the things that you have written throughout the years as a coping
Yeah, no,
mechanism.
it's all been mental health based, and even like lyrics and songs. And I sang for a band for a long time. It was everything in the world to me, which is again such a huge thing. Like dreaming, I remember when I was a teenager, I was gonna be a musician. I was gonna sing. I was gonna perform for a living, and that's what I was gonna do. And I was not that great of a singer, and the people around me are like, it might not work. What are you gonna do next? And you got to have a backup plan. Like I look back on that, and I'm thinking, I'm a teenage kid. I'm just a kid, and I'm learning to dream. I'm learning to visualize and create goals for myself and imagine my world as being better. That's really what I was doing. It had nothing to do with music. It had nothing to do with being a singer or writing or performing in front of people. It was an exercise in visualizing a better life for myself in a better place, in a better mindset, and creating a happier existence in my future, rather than seeing this darkness that is constantly burying us through depression. Because that's one of the things with, and I look at that phase though, and all the people that sort of discouraged me from being a dreamer. Like, man, that's the worst thing they could have done for me. Let me grow, let me think, let me dream. Why would you discourage that? I mean, what a gift that is. When I'm 45 right now, and I struggle very, very hard with depression and suicide still. And dreaming about a better world for myself, dreaming about a better future is one of the best things I could possibly do for myself. If I hadn't had the opportunity to learn how to do that and exercise those kind of feelings and emotions when I was younger, I don't know if it would help me as much as it did today. So dreaming was an incredibly important attribute of wellness and how I got through some of the things that I got through. I look at that. I look at that now and what it means to me and the value and things like that. And that's what I mean about sharing our story and like the attributes that can help and the real value in it.
So, okay. So what would you say that are, because you say you still struggle with that, and because sometimes it's something that we just have to learn how to manage it and live with it. I was also, I mean, when you said your story about abuse, it's sort of the same thing that happened to me, and it was for the same amount of time. So since I was a kid, I was also struggling with all that. I just didn't know what it was. Like, I'm 8. How am I supposed to know that this is anxiety? I mean, so you grow up thinking that that's your normal self because you don't know any better. So right now, what are the things that you do when when you think that you're starting to go to a place in your mind that's not
Yep.
healthy, like you're
So
coping?
the first thing so let me back up a little.
Mm-hmm.
There's a whole lot here in that answer where like what do I do? How do I cope with suicidal thoughts and the things that I've gone through? And I'm going to back up a little to when I went through my suicide attempt and what sort of helped me to get to that next stage and get beyond that. When I survived my suicide attempt, one of the first things I needed to understand, I had this impression afterwards that, okay, if I'm going to live, then I'm going to live. I'm going to do it. I'll stick with it. But
Yeah.
there is no way I'm going to do it the way I've been. There's no way I'm going to struggle for the rest of my life and fight the rest of my life and live like this. I'm not going to have an existence like that. So if I'm going to commit to living in this life, then I have to figure this out and I have to understand how I'm going to have control over this and how I'm going to live in a different way, in a new way that can help me a little better. And the first thing I had to do was understand why I attempted suicide. And I think that's a huge question, especially for people who've lost someone to suicide.
Mm-hmm.
Why do they attempt? Why did they do that? And for me, I think that answer is very, very complicated, and I think it's almost impossible to answer. But to
Yeah,
make
I
it
was going to
very,
say
very
that.
simple,
It's
well, to
really hard
simplify it,
to.
it's definitely very hard. And to make it make sense to me in my small little mind, I have to simplify it as much as possible. And the way I simplify it and the way I answer that is, I believe we consider suicide and people attempt suicide because they want, in its most simplest form, is because we want something to change and feel incapable of changing it. So
Mm-hmm.
in its most basic form, we want something to change and we feel incapable of changing it. Now that something is different for everybody. It can
Exactly.
be, you want your mental health to be better. You want your life to be different. You lost a spouse, you got a divorce, like a million things you could add up to that you want to be different. For me, I wanted life to be different. I wanted everything to be changed. I didn't want to be that 8-year-old kid hiding under my covers, afraid of my parents. I didn't want to be running home from school, not wanting to get beat up. I didn't want to be held under my house to be sexually abused and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And when I sat back and realized it, I knew that life had changed. Life was different. I wasn't that 8-year-old kid anymore. I wasn't that teenage kid in a psychiatric hospital. Life had changed. But the one thing that hadn't was me. I hadn't changed. So if I hadn't changed and I wanted to change and needed to change so badly that I was willing to die for it, why hadn't I changed? And the reality is there's two answers to that. And it's a hard answer for both. One, I liked it. I liked it. It's the only world I knew. My darkness, my pain, all
Mm-hmm.
of it, it was all I had. It was my identity. It was how I wrote. It was how I was in touch with myself. As dark as it was me. It was mine. Don't take that away from me. I liked it. It was me, and I didn't want to let it
Mm-hmm.
go. As badly as I wanted it to stop, I didn't want to let it go. And then the second part is I was scared. I was afraid. Like I didn't know what life was like on the other side. I didn't know what it was like to live a normal life and take
And
risks
be
and
safe.
fail and be and continue on.
Yeah.
Like I didn't know that. I didn't know if I even wanted anything to do with that.
Mm-hmm.
But the reality is, and I can tell this if there is anybody right now who is considering suicide or going through anything that is hurting them, I can tell you, you have absolutely
Mm-hmm.
nothing to be afraid of. There's nothing left to be scared of. It doesn't get worse than this. It doesn't. It's as bad as it gets. and realizing that like no matter what decision I make to get well, like it might feel worse because I'm spending a lot of time down at the bottom, but it doesn't get lower than that. It doesn't hurt
Yeah.
worse than that. So any decision I make to improve myself is either going to leave me there or take me higher. And I decided to just, okay, let's go higher. Let's try to make something. Let's try to figure this out. How am I going to look at things different in my life? And the way I did that was one of the biggest things is I kept looking at myself and thinking I wanted to die. I wanted to die so badly because things needed to change. The reality was I didn't want to die. I was willing to die. I wanted things to be different so badly in my life that I was willing to die for it. Think about the power in that. Think about the potential,
Yeah.
the force that lies within us. You're willing to die to make things different. Stop. If I can get myself out of the depressive state of mind and look at a positive state of mind, like that's unstoppable. You will change your life
Yeah.
if you're in that place. Undoubtedly, you're going to change your life. The problem is when we end up getting there, we get in that position of willing to die for change through depression. And the way depression works, for anyone who doesn't understand it, and most people who do and just can't articulate it, from my perspective, what happens is our vision gets very narrow, and people think like, oh, you when you're depressed, like you only see a little bit. And the reality is that's true, but at the same time you also see in concepts. So when I looked back on my life and I looked at what was behind me, I didn't look back and have a series of memories and all these things that I had gone through. I looked back and assigned these huge attributes to my life and my existence. I was molested. I just stamped myself with a human attribute of who I was for like 8 years of my life. I was molested. I had bad parents. I was bullied. I have mental health issues. And I started seeing myself in these big conceptual thoughts through a depressive state of mind. All those good moments went away. All the day-to-day living went away. And I just had these huge chunks that I assigned to myself of who I was. And then
Yeah,
you take that.
we tend to attach to that part, like the trauma, that part of our lives. Like that's
Exactly.
our identity. That's
Exactly.
what
And
we
then you
think
take
that
that.
it is.
And then you take that in a depressive state of mind and you in suicidal, and you think about your future and what's in front of you,
Yeah.
and all you have to forecast your future is what you've been through in the past, and you just see it getting worse and worse and being the same thing on the other side. And then you try to live in the now, which is that little space that people think depression is, that where you're in this closed off little thing. And that's true, and that's what it is. But the problem is when you get depressed, as you go through depression, it's like you're being emptied. It's like everything that is hopeful in you and that has a positive outlook for the future, all those things start to drain and slowly get taken away from you and start to back up. And in the end, you're left with this momentum of being emptied and being closed off and forced to the bottom. So when we get to a point when we start thinking that I want something to be different, I want change so badly, I'm willing to die for it. Because we're headed in this negative direction, we continue to think, I want to die for it. We continue to go in that direction rather than saying, wait, stop. No, I'm empty. I'm at zero. I have nothing but a blank slate in front of me to create
Exactly.
and change
So
and make myself the biggest priority and say, no, I don't want to die for it. I'm willing to die for it. And because I'm willing to die, nothing is going to stand in my way. And I will change however I need to change and create a life that I never had before, and do it in a way that I can't imagine anyone else would be able to. Like, we have that potential, and I think when we get down in that suicidal state of mind, we lose that, and we're blinded by the fact that we were pushed there in such a negative way that we continue to see it negative and don't see the opportunity for intense, massive, incredible growth that can come from it.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, especially if you were, if you were a victim of abuse when you were a kid, and it comes from this. My therapist explained this to me. She says that well, mine started when I was 6. So she says that's the moment that your brain kind of starts figuring out who you are, what your personality will be. So if you're going through extreme trauma at that moment, that's what that's the things that you're going to become. And And it went on for such a long time that I just became this anxious, jumpy, always afraid person. And I had no idea that was wrong because I grew up that way. So I think that's important also in the fact that I didn't realize how bad that was until I reached like rock bottom, like really low. And I was like, okay, this is not what I want. I just want to get better and, go up. But it takes acknowledging that it takes a lot. And I wish that we all could kind of get to that point without having to reach rock bottom. But
I
I
agree
would.
with you. I also think that there is and then maybe this is controversial, and I don't care if it is, but I think the people like us and the people who struggle, and so many of us who's people who are watching this right now and listening, I there's something incredibly special about us. I look at it like we are explorers in the human experience, and we have taken on a mission, willing or not, to go so far beneath the surface of human emotion and human experience to consume ourselves in some of the places that most people will never ever be able to go, and we can do that, and we doing it, and we did it.
Yeah.
And if we can come back from that with documented information about what we found and how we got out of it and what helped us from it and how we got to the surface again, I mean, there's so much value in that to help everyone else who can't find their way out. Like if I'm going down there, there's a reason for it. And I have to look at my life that way. That's how I've been able to cope with everything that I have coped with is, I'm not getting spiritual on you, but I will tell you, I think there is a reason for everything. And that's not an arbitrary fix all type of statement that I'm
Hmm.
making. I believe that if there is a reason for everything, it is in the very least to teach us something. You will not convince me that I can't learn something from every experience I've had in life. So if there's an opportunity for me to learn from everything I've been through, then what are those things that I've learned? And then when I assign that learning, when I assign that value to my darkest experiences, they're no longer dark. They no longer hurt me. They no longer have power over me. I I
Yeah.
I was gifted from them, and I learned to be compassionate, and I learned to have a good heart, and I learned to read people, and I learned to understand myself. So I could claim a victim all day about the mental health issues I've struggled
Hmm.
with. But when I look at what I've been through in mental health and I look for a reason, like why did I struggle the way I have? Why have I been so beaten?
Yeah,
The
we
reality is
that why is so it's inside. It's like, yeah, go
it's
ahead. I
deep.
just.
Yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
No, it is. But if I look at that, and I don't want to just ask that. I want to answer it. I mean that. Why? Why do I experience mental health issues to the level that I have? Well, if I'm going to assign a reason for that, if I'm going to assign something I learned from it, what did I gain from all that I've been through? One of the biggest things I can take away from it is that I have been given the opportunity to go so deeply inside myself
Hmm.
that, like, how many people get the opportunity to be so deep inside their own thoughts that they're allowed to stay there, explore them, manipulate the thoughts that they have, compartmentalize them, put them back, and talk their way out. Like
Yeah.
there's almost there's almost no other potential in the world, no other opportunity in the world where I would have had the chance to learn who I am. Probably
Yeah.
the greatest lesson in self-discovery I could have ever asked for was through the mental health issues that I've struggled with. If that's what I had to go through to learn what I have about myself, I am totally okay with that. And they're no longer dark, and it no longer has its power over me.
Yeah, you took the power of being something dark and you turned it into a life experience that's not attached to that trauma or that experience that you know um also I wanted to add, when you started talking about the why, and because it's not us. It's the first thing that a lot of people ask when you come out and you start talking about it. The why did it take you so long to come out? Why did it? And there's so many why. And you can't attach, in my opinion, I mean, this is my opinion, I'm not an expert, but you can attach a logical explanation to something that was not supposed to happen at all. I mean, you're not supposed to be a kid and be molested. So you there's really no logic and no real sense into getting there, because it's not something that was supposed to be at all. Like, all those type of trauma, they're not supposed to happen at any age. So I think that's also why people have trouble trying to understand, because they're trying to look at it from a logic point of view.
Right.
I don't know if
Yeah, of course.
if
Yeah.
I'm making,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Well,
I learned that, and I had to, tell them, like, I know you're trying to find some logic around it, but you don't have to, because there's none.
right.
There's no logic around something that was never supposed to happen at all. So
Right.
it's easier when you just try to figure out in any other way, that just getting frustrated because you can't get a logical explanation, or you can't give others a logical explanation, because that's their point of view. That's where their mind goes.
Yeah. I had a lot of time in my life to feel to try to think about, like, why did I go through what I've gone through? Like, what did I
Mhm.
do? Why did it all happen? And in the
Yeah,
end,
we blame ourselves.
yeah, right, exactly. It's hard not to. And in the end, I have to look at, okay, well, how much time am I going to spend in that space, and what value is it bringing to me, and what good is it doing me to be there, and keeps asking myself this question and trying to solve it and figure it out. Is that happening anymore? Does that power still exist right now? Am I still that kid under the house being molested? I'm
Yeah.
not. So when I was talking about creating earlier, right? Like the fact that, like, look at these people right now are seeing these images in their mind, and they're making them manifest in front of them on the page. When
Hmm.
we think about the experiences we've gone through, and we go back into our memories, and we relive the things that have hurt us, we continue to recreate those things in front of us. The reality is, what's happening right now, those situations aren't happening to me right now. I am not I'm not a little kid in my bedroom scared to
Yeah.
death right now. I can put myself there if I want to. I can think about it and make it manifest, and I can turn myself inside out and make my heart beat
Hmm.
heavy and break out in a sweat and in tears, and I can create
Anxiety
that if I
and
want
chest
to.
pain and all that.
Yeah, so I can create that, but is that really what I want to do? Because what's actually happening right now? None of that is happening right now. All that's happening is I'm creating a situation that I'm re-feeling, and I can control that. And this
Hmm.
goes back to being an expert. Like, an expert in something, like, you can be an expert in your own life, and you can have the ability to control what's happening to you right now and how you're feeling about that. The fact that these people can visualize an image and put it on a page so beautifully also says that you can visualize an image of you in a better place in life, feeling happier, feeling more fulfilled, feeling free from all the trauma you've experienced, and you can create that situation in front of you as well. Instead of being on a page, it's in real life around you.
Exactly. Yeah. I had one guest on the show that I have, and she referred to her experience of, as if you're reading a book, and that book, you read that book, and it's done. It's not who you are. It's just like a chapter in your life, a moment in your life that's gone, and that's not coming back. And I think I find that like kind of an easy way to put it, because people keep trying, and people close to you keep trying to, they want to understand, and they keep, like, sometimes they push too much, and you have to, you have to kind of, look, I'm going to try to explain it the best way that I can, but you might never understand it, and that's okay. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, because sometimes, I stopped trying to, ask the why it happened to me. I just stopped because it was not my fault.
Mm-hmm.
So it was not a burden that I had to carry. So why would I, go back and keep, being not kind to myself and just going over and over and trying to see what I could have done different? Nothing.
Exactly.
I was 7. How am I
It-
supposed to even know? And not if you're 7, if you're 20, 30, whatever. It's like it's not something that's supposed to happen. So you're not prepared for reacting to that.
Right.
So I
I
think
think
that's
I think too. There's a part of this where it's hard for some people to hear, but especially when we've been victimized and we're now made to feel a certain way and experience something, there's a point in
called a
life where
liar. I was called a liar a bunch of time. I still am.
I can understand that. I'm sorry. That's hard. I've been through the similar things, especially being so public about my story. Um,
Hmm.
only I've been told that from the people who hurt me most, though. Like they don't want to accept
Yeah.
their own issues and accept responsibility. But I think to your point, especially when we've been victimized, there's a point in our lives where we actually start to turn into victimizing ourselves, where those people no longer exist in our lives.
Hmm.
And I keep reliving those scenarios, and I keep going through these situations with my mother and with the person who molested me. And I'm creating those scenarios now. They don't even exist. My mother died. My mother doesn't live anymore. And I still relive these experiences that I relive inside me. At some point,
Yeah.
I'm the one who's creating that still. I'm the one who's making myself relive it. And that kind of goes to a question here. I see C.S. Murphy asking, like,
Yeah.
why do some of us keep going back to reliving those unhealthy mindsets? And I personally believe, for me, because in my own experience, the reason I find myself reliving certain things is because honestly, there's something in there I need to learn. There's something I need to grow from that. And when I don't grow from that and I don't learn from that, it keeps showing itself and being like, hey, there's something here, and you're going to keep experiencing it over and over and over till you understand what it is. And I've always found in every single case, when I've found a way to learn and grow from an experience, it no longer affects me. It genuinely,
Hmm.
in my heart of hearts, I can tell you, it does not affect me anymore. Now I can choose to relive it again. I can choose to go through a similar circumstance. I can choose to invite a relationship in my life that represents that same person who might have hurt me once. It's the same scenario. I can put myself in that situation if I want to, but I don't have to. I don't have to relive
Exactly.
it. I learned it. I graduated. I have my diploma. I don't need to go back to that class. I
Cum
live by
laude
that.
with honors. Yeah. So did you read the, yeah, CS, does that answer your question? What you were trying to, I'm just seeing it now.
Good. Yep.
Um, oh, Kelly,
Awesome.
hi. It's okay, Kelly. You can, we'll make it up. Um, I was gonna say something and I just lost my train of thought again. But meanwhile, you can, well, Badges and Bobby and Joe can, guide us through what you're doing, because they're very different, but they're very good. So I'm just like kind of curious of what you thought when I asked you to be part of it, and you were like, okay, I'm gonna do it. So Bobby, if you want to,
Oh, me
that's a really
first?
good one. Yeah.
Well, wow. I've been like a little bit teary myself here. I was trying to hold back. Very moving story there. Thank you for sharing. I know it's not easy to share personal things, and especially I do understand when both of you say like having to go against family with not believing and things like that as well. That must have been hard. But thank you for sharing your story, and I'm sure that a lot of people, it will help a lot of people. And what I have been doing here myself is pretty much this is um, people, myself including, is mental health, a bit of um, well, loneliness sometimes, things that
Yeah.
people don't see on the outside. Is this painting that I've done before as well is like half and half. Here is the half
Yeah, I
that
like that one,
we
bud.
are in
Hmm.
pain on the inside and suffering in silence, but then uh, filters and all smiling on outside. So it's very, we have to talk
A
about
lot of
depression
filters.
and mental health, and ask for help if we need it. Personally, I find art, the coping mechanism for me, and I like take a lot of walks. And being an artist, I think maybe is, but with most artists that I speak to, they kind of have had suffered a bit of a depression in some way or form, because we are our own worst critics. And if we get other
Yeah.
people not liking our art and comparing and doing all that stuff and frustration, and then it's a lot of things that pile up, right? So it will take you down to that whirlpool of depression very easy. But that's it. I am constantly busy and I keep painting and drawing. So a lot of times you feel like you are in a box. That's my idea there. But you
Hmm.
have to remember that even though you are lonely and you feel like the walls are coming in, you don't find a way out, it's just a wave in the ocean. So if that's how I think it is. My mom used to say that, life is a war, she used to say, so you have to, and it's like in the ocean, you are in the ocean, the waves gonna come, one gonna come and crushing in in the seafront or by the rocks, and one it's going to be gentle and you're just gonna go and float away. So pretty much I just, you have to hold your breath and take that wave and ride it. That's how I see it. So when that comes, my low times, my low mode comes, and I tell, like, I speak about it openly with my community. I never been kind of in taking medication or anything, because I never let myself in that stage. I
Hmm.
immerse myself into the art, I talk to people, or I have the other way, I paint and draw, I take long walks in nature. That helps me a lot. The sound of birds and a lot of walks, and just being in my own thoughts, but not thinking negative or like, oh, finances are not doing well, or this is
Yeah.
not doing well, so all the negative things that brings me to that state that I'm feeling like, alone, or and I'm always with people, because it doesn't mean that you can be surrounded by people not to feel alone. Because a lot of times, you are with people and you feel most alone pretty much. So yeah, and talking, but sometimes being in your own mind, just write a diary, write your thoughts. Writing
Yeah.
is great, and as Greg was saying, crying, it's my best friend. I cry a lot. I teach my son is 15 now, but I tell him, if you're feeling anger, or if you have any emotions that pile up, just have a good
Just
cry,
let
because
it out.
I
Yeah.
love that. I cry, just for no particular reason. Even if I'm not like sad, but I feel like, in my stomach, I have something welling up. And I know that crying helps, and I write things down. So that what helps me as well. But that's my idea. And you are not alone. You can always talk to
Yeah.
the person, just telling them that I want a listening ear. And I do offer my listening ear to a lot of friends that I see that they kind of going through something, and then I share my experiences if they ask to. So sometimes just listening and being there for people is also good without passing judgment, you know. But yeah, that's my kind of little thing in here, being in a box and feeling lonely and stuff. But you always have to remember that it's a lot of people that, even they not
Yeah.
talking freely, they are in the same boat, they're riding the same wave, because we are all in this big ocean. But some of them going to be in a different location, that is going to be in the Caribbean, lovely calm, you know, ocean, and some is going to ride that hurricane. So it's just a chapter, and you do not have to end it there, you know. That's why I did the semicolon. It's just the chapter, and then you just continue, you know. So that's what I did. I was just throwing some hands in here and, you know, get a helping hand and what have you. So I'm
Yeah,
just
that's
building up
really.
a bunch of things there.
I also had something that came up and it just went.
Mm.
Oh, again, I don't know. But it was something that you were saying. I just can't remember right now. Sorry, my
Oh,
brain sometimes. Yeah. So I'll go to with Joe or
Yo, Bob,
Badges.
how
Oh,
are you doing? Man, I tell
oh.
you, Craig, that it was kind of hard for me to paint and in a good way, but just listen to your story, how through adversity and stuff, you kind of have found your voice and your reason. And I was listening to you as you were talking about, you know, we're part of the selective few that actually have a grander scope of understanding the big picture. And you know, it's interesting. I've suffered with mental health pretty much my entire life. I've talked about it here on the platform. Lucia knows,
Mm-hmm.
but you know, the reason for my piece is just kind of like freedom. You know, even though it was a difficult season and we went through it, we have the wings and we're flying now because we have a greater understanding of who we are as individuals. And so, you know, I'm using the color scheme here of suicide awareness and mental
Mm-hmm.
health. And I just wanted, instead of just drawing your typical ribbon, I wanted to draw it with wings, because essentially all of us here to some degree have a greater understanding, especially after today, of who we are and exactly some of the things that's happened to us in our life. It doesn't define us, it just makes us stronger. It
Exactly.
helps us,
They're not.
it's step stools. And so that's the point of mine, is I wanted to kind of do a piece that harkens back to that we all have wings, that we all have this now greater awareness of who we are, and we have the scars to prove it, whether it's on our it's psychological or physical. And
Mm-hmm.
but I just really, man, Craig, your story is just fascinating, dude. And I'm
Thank you.
just so thankful that you had you you basically had the intuition to go forward and write your book and get it out there despite all the circumstances and hurdles. You did it. You made it, and that's awesome. But
Thank you.
that's the point of my piece here today.
Yeah. I just remember what I was going what I was going to say that Bobby mentioned that when what we need sometimes from the people around us, and she said it, to just listen and be there and not judge, and you know sometimes that's enough. I mean, we're not trying, when we tell our story or we share with friends or anything, we're not seeking them to make us feel better. It's just, with just listening and not judging. That's basically, I mean, that's it. It sounds simple, but not everyone can do that. So that's why I wanted to sort of point that out. Yeah, holding space, exactly. CS. That's the, yeah. So Badges, it's you.
Okay. Hi, everybody. I wanted to kind of focus a little bit on art as a therapy or a coping mechanism whenever you're in the moments of peak anxiety or depression or whatever. Sometimes it's difficult to hone in on reality a little bit, you get kind of off the rails. And so a lot of the times I use Zentangling, because you kind of are taking yourself into an artistic meditation of sorts. And so you're focusing on the pattern, and you're controlling your breath, and your brain kind of naturally calms down and kind of centers itself. And so it's just something that I've really liked to use as a practice whenever I get, because I struggle with anxiety often. And so this kind of helps me recenter my world a little bit.
Yeah.
So I wanted to kind of do that little practice for you guys live here, because it's not normally something that I do live on my streams. Usually you guys see me doing something a little more complicated. And it's kind of simple in concept, but it's very beautiful whenever it ends. And it's kind of fun too. Kind of the same concept of like the adult coloring books. I've seen
Mm-hmm.
several people do that. And I do that as well. And it
I
really
have a
has the
full wall.
same. Yes, she has the whole mural behind her, so she knows all about that. But it's the same concept as that of what I use to kind of deal whenever my brain is not behaving the way I would like it to.
No, but I think that's important. And to be completely honest, when I really started to, meditate and try to ground myself and all that, breathing is really, if you look like the common denominator in all of that, it's all about the breathing.
Oxygen is good for your brain.
Yeah, it is. It sounds, people, and sometimes when I get, the unsolicited advice, you might say, of Craig said about the tea, I laugh about that a lot when I share that I have chronic insomnia, and they're like, have you tried like chamomile tea? And I'm like,
Try the tea.
thank you, but that's not quite the thing that I need. I can put like 7 bags of that and I'm not gonna sleep. So, but thank you. I mean, A for effort, but breathing it's major.
Yes,
It has been life changing for me since I started doing that, like in a serious way.
indeed.
It has worked better than any medication I've been, to be completely honest. So yeah, I find it very powerful. Um, so I don't know if you want to add something else, Greg, before we say goodbye.
Sure. I guess I think this is awesome, and I want to thank you and everyone else who listened and came on, especially for the art of it all. It's absolutely awesome. I think what we have right now, you brought up COVID and the pandemic, and I saw some stuff in the comments about it too.
Mhm.
I think what we have right now globally is probably one of the best opportunities I can remember in my life, and I think in any type of recent history, where there is truly an opportunity for empathy like we've never seen before. So you have people who don't understand mental health issues. You have people who've never experienced depression, never got it, never understood what anxiety was about, and why don't you just snap out of it kind of mentality. For the first time ever, have been forced into a position where they can't leave their house, they can't be social, they can't live their life the way they want to, and they're experiencing it for the first time. Now, if they can imagine that's what it's like for us when there is no pandemic to justify those kind of feelings and
Mhm.
that kind of lifestyle and what we're experiencing. I think there's an opportunity for us to continue sharing our stories and using this as an opportunity to drive more compassion and more empathy and more understanding, and have people realize that there isn't just a mental health crisis right now from what we've
And
gone through
it's
in the
not
last couple of
just
years.
snap out of it.
Yeah, right. And we actually have the opportunity to create a mental health movement from this. And I think with things like this, we can
Hmm.
keep doing that. So thank you for doing this and having me as part of it.
Thank you for, sharing your story and being here with all of us. But yeah, I think the pandemic it's gonna open the eyes of a lot of people. I mean, sadly, because they might have, now suffered from maybe anxiety, maybe even depression, and that might take them to a place where they would be, wow, it's not that simple as, you just don't think about it. It's like, yeah, that's not how it works either, but thank you. So I think that's going to be like an eye opening for a lot of, people that are trying to understand, but they really can't. So yeah, I think we have done something here um, positive. I think I hope anyone who tuned in got to get something out of it, because at the end, that's what we're trying to do. It's like we're trying to share our experience and getting something positive that might help others. That's basically it. So yeah, thank you everyone for tuning
Excellent.
in. Thank you
Thank
guys
you.
for amazing artwork and for being there.
Thanks for inviting us.
And
Thank you, Lucia, for organizing and planning this, and
yeah,
pleasure talking with you, Craig. It's truly an honor.
Thank you.
so that would be the end of our takeover. And you can follow Craig, and his amazing job. He's also a photographer. I had the pictures here, and I didn't. I'm just gonna show one. Yeah, he's also a photographer. That's another coping mechanism. And yeah, so you can follow him on, I don't know if you want to, do you have your social media connected to your profile, or
If I
just
don't,
follow
I'll
him?
set it up. I'm new here.
Okay, it's
We
okay.
hope that you join Happs and do regular broadcasts, because the more we talk about, mental health and suicide, and make it normal, like we talk about, let's have a coffee, and it's not a taboo, because people are scared to talk, because we're going to think, like in Albania, it's still taboo, and people killing themselves, and nobody, doing anything, because they don't talk about it, because it's still
Mhm.
taboo. People think that, oh, you're crazy if you talk that you have a depression, or if you have any kind of mental health. So I hope you do regular broadcasts here on Hubs. I'm happy
Yeah,
I got to hear your story. Thank you very much for sharing with us,
Thank
and
you.
thank you, Lucia, for organizing it. I hope somehow it helps somebody to hear
yeah,
that they are not alone. That's my little message there. And if you need to talk, I'm always there. I say that every day in every broadcast I do.
it's
If
true.
anybody needs a listening ear, I can talk until your ears fall off, but I can also listen really well. So
That's true.
thank you guys.
Yeah, well, thank
Good.
you
Thanks so much.
everyone, and that would be all, and I'll see you soon around here.